Let's head right into our next panel discussion, ladies and gentlemen. This one's also a very special one. It's my pleasure to invite the following panelists on stage before I introduce the moderator. Ladies and gentlemen, our next panel discussion will be under the title Resurgent Sri Lanka, Employment and Entrepreneurship Opportunities in Post-War Sri Lanka. Our first panelist I'd like to invite on stage is a product design engineer and inventor in a variety of fields. His extensive experience of 37 years includes companies such as Boeing, Xerox, and Silicon Valley startup companies, briefly including Netscape during the internet boom years. He is currently designing a fully automated robotic air cargo network to alleviate the problem of world hunger and rural farmer poverty via a low-cost, environmentally friendly air transportation network. He sees a bright future for Sri Lanka in using low-cost electronics to make dumb mechanical devices smart, mechatronics in other words, and wants to help transform our engineers who largely work as intellectual laborers into designers of products that the world wants to buy by the millions. He holds MSc and BSc with high honors in mechanical engineering from the University of Hawaii and is a certified project management professional. Ladies and gentlemen, on stage we have Tilak Dissanayake, Managing Director and Engineer for ENS Global Private Limited. Please give him a big hand. Thank you for joining us, sir. Our next panelist is a serial entrepreneur and an active investor in early stage companies in Sri Lanka. He is the founder of Lankan Angel Network, which is Sri Lanka's first alliance of angel investors. He has been instrumental in creating the startup ecosystem in Sri Lanka, including launching the Venture Engine program. He engages deeply with investee companies in all areas of company building, including forging international partnerships, building teams, sales and marketing, and follow-on fundraising. Prior to his entrepreneurial experience in Sri Lanka, he has spent many years in leading businesses in UK and Australia. Mr. Prajeeth Balasubramaniam, ladies and gentlemen, the founding partner and managing director for Blue Ocean Ventures Private Limited, Sri Lanka. He's also a general partner for BOV Capital, Singapore. Mr. Prajeeth Balasubramaniam. Our next panelist is currently serving as the Senior Director of Human Resources at Virtusa, Sri Lanka, where she is responsible for the professional development and engagement of 2,500 plus employees. She was awarded the HR Leadership Award by the Asia Pacific HRM Congress in 2014 and was recognized as Echelon Magazine's list of 50 most powerful women in Sri Lanka for 2015. Recently, she was conferred the Women Leadership Achievement Award by the World Women Leadership Congress. She has a bachelor's degree in business administration and her master's in business administration and has also attended executive education programs conducted by INSEAD Business School. It's my pleasure to invite on stage Senior Director Human Resources at Virtusa, Chandi Dharmaratne. Our next panelist is an executive chairman and controlling shareholder of Asia Securities Private Limited, a leading securities firm in Sri Lanka. It is a founder and chief executive officer of Panthera Ventures Private Limited, an investment and advisory company based in Colombo. Until February 2013, he was the managing director and group chief operating officer, Asia Pacific at Credit Suisse Bank, based in Hong Kong. In 2013, the World Economic Forum selected him as one of its young global leaders, the only Sri Lankan among the year's honorees. He received his secondary education in Colombo and obtained a BA honors in physics and economics from Middlebury College, USA, and an MBA from the Harvard Business School. We have with us Dumith Fernando, founder Panthera Ventures and chairman Asia Securities. Thank you for joining us. And our final panelist is the Director Human Resources and Corporate Relations for Unilever Sri Lanka. He has been the country HR Director for Unilever Sri Lanka since May and has been involved in the global supply chain Unilever for the past 4 years. Before that, he has worked in Switzerland, based in Switzerland, and traveled to the likes of UK, US, and Europe. He has 23 years in India before that and handled businesses in India and parts of Asia. He enjoys cross-cultural experiences. He says loves music, books, and jogging. And he's none other than Samir Nagarajan. I'd like to invite you on stage as well. Thank you for joining us. Moderating this session, ladies and gentlemen, will be an economist, blogger, and hobbies photographer. He has published research in many international and national publications, led projects in South Asia, and worked in South Korea as an Asia Development Fellow. In 2013 and 2014, he was recognized in Echelon Magazine's 40 Under 40 list of Sri Lanka's most influential young people and is a New Champions Awardee of the World Economic Forum. He holds a master's and bachelor's in economics from the UK and is currently the chief economist of the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce. Please put your hands together for Anushka Vijay Singha. All right, I'll hand things over to you, Anushka.
Thanks a lot, Dino. Good afternoon, ladies and gents. It's usually customary that the moderator says at the end of lunch and when we go into our lunch session that it's the graveyard shift, it's tough to stay awake, but I can guarantee you that this is going to be a cracker of a panel. We have some of Sri Lanka's top innovators, rule breakers, thought leaders, and doers, in my opinion, and I'm really looking forward to this interaction. I personally was an early returnee, returned to Sri Lanka from the UK just months before the end of the war. And it was a good time to return because I was able to establish myself fairly early and be part of exciting things that happened soon after that. So before I get into the first two presentations, the format for the panel will be, we have two opening presentations by Tilak and Prajeeth. Then we'll have a little bit of a panel interaction where our other panelists will speak briefly. And then I'd like to go straight away into some audience questions. So keep an eye out for things you find interesting or intriguing, and let's pick them up during the audience Q&A. So to kick things off, Tilak, always entertaining, always inspiring. Over to you.
Right. Thank you, Anushka. Thank you to WorkInSriLanka for this opportunity. Anushka's introduction has already caused performance anxiety. He said it's supposed to be entertaining. I'm going to talk actually more about the challenges rather than the opportunities. And of course, Praj will tell you how to get money for it. He's the next logical guy. Oh, wow. He's even got a count. I have an hour. No, just kidding, right? Yeah. All right. Let me get going. So I'm an engineer, so I'm going to give you an engineering entrepreneur's perspective. Where is the... Oh, there. Okay. Lovely. I'm going to quickly run through my experience. I won't dwell too much on it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to summarize in terms of pros and cons. So there, I think we'll get into some details. First one, I came here actually to look after my dad in 2001. My mom had died in 1997. And also to do a crazy project. So this it was a dog tag cover. And so we manufactured it here, patented it in the US and Sri Lanka as well. And so that was the operation we produced. And by the way, Sri Lankans are utterly, absolutely capable of doing quality work. I worked with about a couple dozen suppliers, all the way from garment factories to packaging people. And they did a very good job, particularly after the second time when I said, no, I want it exactly per the spec. And so if you're a demanding customer, they're utterly capable of doing these things. Then I did various volunteer work and concept development stuff, 2004 to 5. Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot to tell you, the fallacy about patents. Somebody filed a cease and desist order against us. And we went and spoke to our attorneys, and it turned out that we'd need a couple of $100,000 to contest that. Given that this was a $6, $7 item making about $2, $3 per profit on each, we decided to shut the business down. That's how that came to an end. That's a lesson learned for all those people who think that patents are great. They just give you the right to sue somebody. That's all it does. So please understand that. So you better have lots of money in your budget to be prepared to sue people. So various volunteer work things that I did, and then essentially I started doing some consulting work in the IT field in Malaysia and Singapore. My dad died in 2007. I came back, and then essentially was employed at a large family-owned company whose name I will not mention to protect the guilty. And I was hired on as a director there in the IT side, and developed actually a payment system using SMS. Unfortunately, because of various internal politics, it never went to market. It still hasn't gone to market. If some of you have seen Easy Cash, this is a gazillion times better than Easy Cash, but it'll never see the light of day. So these are all these bitter experiences, actually, but all good lessons learned. And then essentially, I started this small company called Ants Global. Actually, it exists fundamentally in name only because I'm the only employee, essentially. I have a couple of contract engineers who work with me. And we started actually with doing a van sales system. Think of an ERP on a Windows mobile platform. That's essentially what it was. So far better than the usual pricing and inventory list that you get on a van sales system. Unfortunately, Microsoft decided to change their operating system to something completely different on their Windows platform. So all of the 3 years worth of development that we had done was totally and utterly useless. So we had to cut it over to Android, and by this time, the one main engineer who was on the project, I was programming, my ex-wife was also a programmer, and we put huge amounts of money into it. This 36-year-old guy dies on the day that we start the Android conversion. So even though I'm not a God person, I said, this is definitely a sign from God. So we stopped that project. Anyway, so I'm just telling you these things because these are all the realities. So then after that, what I started was to solve world hunger. So we're doing this robotic air cargo network to literally solve world hunger on my pension funds. Because by this time, I had run through a huge amount of money that I had while I was in Silicon Valley. So let me get to the pros and cons part. Sorry, is that 5 minutes into it already? Ooh, okay.
4 and a bit.
I'll quickly do this. Sorry, where's the, is the lap over there? Okay, good. Okay, so easy to set up a company through a company secretary, no problem at all doing that. And then utterly capable talent in Sri Lanka. They need a little work, but there's utterly capable talent out here that you can find. And then some of the local authorities are amazing to work with. Specifically, Civil Aviation Authority is an unbelievably professional organization. And then, I'm reading now. Insistent customer will get you quality work. I've summarized that particular point. And literally 2 degrees of separation, sometimes only 1. So you meet all kinds of interesting people. I think you've heard this all around this morning, saying that get out, meet people, and then suddenly people are very willing to make connections. Not in any way expecting anything in return, but saying, hey, let me help you out. And this can be total strangers that you meet for the first time. And so they'll put you on, hey, I know so-and-so. And not from the aspect of saying, you know, I know the PM kind of show-off thing, but genuine interest in helping somebody out here. So I found that to be a huge, huge advantage. On the con side, there's quite a list there. Working for family-owned companies is very difficult. I've told you that already. And then essentially, some nightmarish local authorities, specifically customs. Minister Karunanayaka's people, anybody here? Please fix that problem. And then, this is a horrible thing to say, but in this culture, sticks seem to work better than carrots to get the job done. And you see this in the traffic thing as well. As soon as they brought the sticks out, suddenly people are in their lanes. Why? I mean, they asked nicely, but never happened. So this is an awful thing to say. Insane traffic, you know that, but it's getting better, those kinds of things. And then essentially Ants Global is a company that has been amazingly, consistently, stunningly in the red. But I still persist here, is an interesting thing. And then basically, the current project, as I mentioned, is I'm running it on retirement funds. So the question to ask is, why the hell am I still here? So this here are all the reasons. Sorry. Oh, that, right. Okay. Right. I'm focused on essentially on bottom of the pyramid customers. Tons of people here you can find. And so if you want to sort of test something or talk to somebody and get an understanding, tons of bottom of the pyramid customers here. So that's one. Good talent, as I mentioned, but they need grooming. So you have to guide them. We were at the entrepreneurship table. We were talking about some of those issues there. And then for my particular thing, if I was trying to do this in the US, I'll be in Guantanamo, and they'll be teaching me how to hold my breath with various electrodes attached to parts of my body. And so it's a good place for me to run this particular project. And then lots of volunteering opportunities here. I'm a great believer in mudita, which is finding joy in the joy of others. So if you are one of those addicts, lots of volunteer opportunities. And lots of things in Sri Lanka are broken, as you heard. So to me, somebody like myself, that means lots of opportunities to fix things. And this is amazing. You can get to the right people to present a crazy idea to do a crazy fix. This is amazing. So you can, I mean, there's myself and some friends, we are talking about essentially a direct democracy, asking the question, why do we need representatives who are intermediaries and all those issues that come with that. So for me, somebody who's essentially a lesson learning, eternal optimist, I will keep trying here because I've been here now for 14 years. Now the question is, everybody's asking, so what happens if this all fails? What would you do? So I will do the standard thing which has worked essentially for millennia and is very easy to do, is to become a guru. Thank you.
Cheers, Tilak. I won't try and summarize that, but I think for me, some of the, when I read between the lines on some of those slides, very important messages for some of our potential returnees. The fact that networking, given the 2 degrees of separation, networking is easy. Finding mentors, I think Prajeeth might talk about this as well. Finding mentors is easy because of that network. And a great place to test bottom of the pyramid customers, great place to test ideas anyway. But also the audience to listen to these crazy ideas is possible. It's not so far-fetched, it's not so far up there. So to pick up on that and more, next up I'd like to call Prajeeth.
Good afternoon. We listen to crazy ideas every day, so you can always come and pitch to us. So how many of you have heard of angel investments? Show of hands. How many have heard of sharks and dragons? Okay. So who is Lankan Angel Network? Okay, sorry about that. So what do we do? There are 2 perspectives to Lankan Angel Network, right? One is from an entrepreneur's perspective. The other is from an investor's perspective. So we created LAN to help entrepreneurs and investors. So the basic, so for investors, basically, you reduce the risks when you go to invest by co-investing with others in the network. For the entrepreneur, basically, you get mentoring, you get a resource pool. So if you want funding, not only funding, but smart money in terms of advice on strategy, if you want to go to the region, that's what we do at Lankan Angel Network, right? So why LAN? It creates an opportunity for entrepreneurs to accelerate their businesses to the next level, right? The process and procedures set out in LAN will facilitate the investors to look at an easy exit for both the investor and the entrepreneur. So far, we have done almost 22 companies, 22 startups, and we have funded over $5 million worth of money into these 22 startups in Sri Lanka in the last 3 years. So we have also identified challenges that entrepreneurs have. And some of the key issues are sharing their plans. They're scared that the plans might get copied. And I was talking to this table, the perception of a Mudalali in Sri Lanka is very derogatory. So we try and preach to people around the country saying, you know, there is a better way of looking at it. You're an innovator or an entrepreneur, you know, and you can also create jobs and fulfill the economy in that sense. Yeah. Building entrepreneurial capabilities at scale and enhancing availability of early stage capital and support. So as angel investors, what do we look for in a plan? A good plan, the uniqueness of product or services offered, a good financial forecast, and most importantly, whether the product is or service is marketable, right? But what we also look for in an entrepreneur is, because you're going into a relationship with the entrepreneur, so the partnership, there has to be a lot of trust, right? So we look at the entrepreneur's flexibility, because businesses can go down, it can go up, and so they need to keep their head above water. So it is important that the entrepreneur is flexible, persevering, have a lot of, needs to be a hustler, to keep the business going. So I've actually listed some of the points here, right? I mean, even to build a team, like you need to know your weaknesses to complement your weaknesses with your strengths. And that's how a team is built to take a business to the next level. So the support we give at Lankan Angel Network is not just the money, but it's called smart money, where we have advisory panels, we have shared resources, we have incubation space, and we also have access to the region through our regional investors. We have investors from the US with 500 startups, to China with a lot of big family funds, and to Australia, we have got some private equity companies there also who look at partnering us and work with us. So, in a nutshell, the benefit to the entrepreneur, if you're going to start up a company, or if you've already started up a company and looking for funding, come into the Lankan Angel Network. You will have access, if you want to expand to the region. You will have access to regional investors. You will have an easy way of setting up companies, whether it's in Singapore, Malaysia, India. You'll have an easier way of setting up your companies. Resource pool. So if you want to, we work with companies such as SSP Corporate Services for secretarial services who will come out and set up a company. We work with Nitya Partners who are the legal advisors who do the SHA. And they are all part of the network, and they actually do this on a very subsidized rate. Benefits to the investors is basically minimizing your risks. Because, I mean, if somebody comes to you and says, I want 10 million bucks, I might go and get 10 other people to put 1 million each. More than that, I may not have the knowledge in that or the expertise in that business, but I can find people to co-invest with me who have that knowledge, and that's where I minimize my risk. And LAN also articulates a good exit strategy for both the investor and the entrepreneur. So if you look at this, is called the funding cycle, and as you can see at the bottom, you have the valley of death. And there are only 3 people who, plus the angels, so they're called the 3 Fs, family, friends, and fools, right? So angels are also known as fools because they go and put their money, and most of the time they lose it, but they say 1 in 10 companies tend to come out there, and that's where we make our money, right? So somebody else was asking me at the table, so when you lose with 9 companies, how do you make your money? But what we do is we cut our losses very early, and we try and, if we feel the entrepreneur is ready to move on, we tweak the idea or we change the idea, and if we really like the entrepreneur, we might just keep funding the entrepreneur to do different ideas until something works, right? So that's how we also make our money and move to the next level. So some of the events we've had in Sri Lanka, these are some of the events around. And Venture Engine is an annual event which is held in Colombo. And this program basically brings down guys from the US, like 500 startups, as I said, some of the big family funds. They come in here, sit with us for 1 week, and mentor the entrepreneurs, and filter them, and give them an opportunity to even go to the Silicon Valley to go through an acceleration program. As I said, the pool of resources, we have got marketing, we have got companies in Singapore who, like Marketers, who can actually help our entrepreneurs set up companies there within their incubation space. PwC, Nitya Partners, and various other companies who actually help us help the entrepreneurs. And as you can see, the network that we have had partnerships with, ABAF is Asian Business Angel Forum. We were at the conference, it's a world conference, and we were at the conference in New Zealand this year. Last year it was in Hong Kong. Next year in Korea, and 2017 we have wanted to host it. So we're going to have a big conference in 2017 with ABAF, and we'll combine all our programs for that week and maybe also look at a startup week, so that our entrepreneurs will benefit from that whole week. So these are the companies we have invested in. So Lankan Angel Network started in 2012 with just 1 person, and today we have 75 people in the network, and all running multinational serial entrepreneurs, serial investors, and most of the investors are direct level and above, who share their experiences with many of the entrepreneurs who otherwise would not get a chance to have access to these guys. So I leave you with the 22 companies that we've funded, and we'll look forward to the session, panel session. Thank you.
Thanks, Prajeeth. And I think for me, why what Prajeeth and others are doing is because Sri Lanka was fairly early in experimenting with venture capital and angel investing early on. But in that early era in the 1990s, it was all bankers running VC funds. And bankers thought like bankers, invested like bankers, moderate risk, moderate return, and nothing really happened. We had Millennium IT, which was a standout. But now we have 22 companies, and actually, this is just part of another, a wider new startup as well as a tech ecosystem where there are new incubators, hackathons happening every week, innovation centers within companies. We have Sri Lankan universities winning international robotics competitions and a lot of exciting stuff. So let's move on to the panel now, and I'll ask you to sort of think of any questions that you have for Tilak and Prajeeth, and also the others as we move along. Let me start with Chandi. Chandi, Virtusa, of course, is well established, certainly beyond the startup phase, of course. But why, for you, is it important to attract global talent and folks like this who are in the room, Sri Lankans living overseas and so on, for a global company like Virtusa, attracting global top talent?
So I think for Virtusa, we just looking from a growth perspective. For 32 quarters, we've had sequential growth quarter over quarter for the last 32 quarters. And from a growth perspective for the last 10 years, we've had an average of 23% growth year on year. So at the same time, with the new acquisition of Polaris, making Virtusa shy of 900 million organization, venturing into larger, as a result of the scale, venturing into larger market shares and new large deals, and providing customers with more end-to-end service. It's imperative that we attract the best global talent, Sri Lankans and non-Sri Lankans, with the domain expertise and the subject matter expertise and the client expertise, the customer expertise, the exposure to come back to Sri Lanka in order to create and support that growth that we're envisioning. So that's why it's imperative for us.
What are some of the things that you do to attract that kind of global talent?
Sure. So if we look at the last 2 years, I think 50%, approximately 50% of the leadership talent that we have recruited has been expatriates or Sri Lankans living overseas, has come from that pool. Even events like this actually help us. I mean, even today I met a girl who we're recruiting as a result of meeting her 3 years ago at the Work in Sri Lanka conference. So it definitely helps us. From an organization perspective, we not only try to recruit at the leadership level, we do a lot at the, even at the undergraduate level. We have an internship program called the International Summer Program that we partnered with Samir, with Unilever, Citibank, and the American Chamber in order to provide these undergraduates during the second year or third year to come back to Sri Lanka and to see what kind of corporate opportunities do they have once they graduate. So they don't have to actually wait till they graduate even. And we see a lot of the hires that we've had. So in synchronized with that, we have a program called the Global Leadership Program. So now the Global Leadership Program is almost 80% recruitment of the interns who have come and seen what it's like to work in Sri Lanka. So programs like that at the undergraduate level, developing that pipeline for Virtusa, and also branding us overseas, and events like this actually help us to get the lateral senior level hires. So that's what we do. Apart from that, ensuring that our headhunters do a good job, I think, in ensuring that the subject matter experts and the domain knowledge experts who live overseas, Sri Lankans, are hopefully coming back. Actually, the funny thing is, recently, in the last 6 months or last 2 quarters, we've had a couple of non-Sri Lankans, expatriates coming back to Sri Lanka because they've been attracted to their partner who is Sri Lankan. So that helps us as well. So that's a good trend, and we were hoping that keeps going as well.
Great. Dumith, I want to ask you as well as many of the folks in the room today are or have been playing at a global level, in global platforms, in large organizations operating globally. Now, moving back to Sri Lanka, maybe some of them will go into firms like Virtusa, which have a global presence. But what does it take really, and what is that shift like, moving from playing at that global level and a global platform bigger to playing in Sri Lanka?
Thanks, Anush, and thanks to the organizers for inviting me here. I think you had to be a little bit mad to do that. I think that's what I kept being told by a lot of my friends when I first told them I was moving back a couple of years ago. But it's a very good question, because I think it is one of the most challenging decisions in that sector, because I overheard in the previous panel, previous discussion, the lady from the finance table mentioned that there was a lot of concern about the sophistication or lack thereof of the sector in Sri Lanka, which is true. But I think, Chandi said they've had 32 quarters of sequential growth. I was at one of the largest banks in the world, and it felt like we had 32 quarters of sequential implosion. So it actually wasn't a very tough decision. I had set my personal goals as well, and I reached a certain point, or reached a certain age that I wanted to get out of the industry, and once I did, it really was a calling from that sort of entrepreneurial side in me to come out and do this in Sri Lanka. It could have been anywhere, but at the end of the day, in Sri Lanka, it was, there were, I think, 3 factors. One is, deep down inside, there's always that hope that you can make a difference, that with your knowledge, your network, your experience, that you can actually come to Sri Lanka in a sector like the financial world and make a difference. And I think what we're seeing is that it is happening. It's slow, but it is happening. We are setting some new standards in some of the things we are doing. Secondly, it really is a personal decision when you make a big leap like that. It's about, to me, I describe it in one word, it's about the right balance. It may not be the right balance for everyone else, but it certainly was for me. And I think it's a mix of the ability to give back, the ability to mold and mentor some people here, the ability to see opportunity. I think here we're seeing some opportunity. If you've seen what you've seen in big companies, big industries, to see how that industry in this country could roll forward is not very difficult. So I think in some ways it actually makes it easier for you to identify what those opportunities are. But the one thing I advise people when you make those transitions is, think of whether you have one thing, and if you don't have that, don't come, is adaptability. Because I went from overseeing a $2.5 billion business to something that's 1,000th of that in terms of revenue. But that doesn't discourage me, because I'm doing that because that's what I wanted to do. So, the most important thing when you're coming from a large platform is to make sure that you're doing something you want to do with some very clear goals. And you do need patience. Being in Sri Lanka in an industry like this is a marathon, it's not a sprint.
Okay. And I think it's interesting, we're hearing a lot about making a difference, and I think what some of the folks on the panel are doing is really pushing what we mean by make a difference. Sometimes it's easy to associate that phrase with charity or working only in the non-profit sector, but what Prajeeth is doing with kickstarting a whole ecosystem which didn't exist before, mentoring new startups, what Dumith is talking about, introducing new types of investment tools, pushing the boundaries on the financial industry, that's also making a difference and bringing back what you knew to shake things up here. Moving on to Samir. Samir, you're from a multinational background, and I'm hearing from several multinationals, Unilever and others, there's even another dairy industry player, that they're really looking at Sri Lanka as this, at the next or current big growth opportunity. I mean, I heard from this big dairy multinational that out of a handful, less than 10 new markets that they're actually investing in, Sri Lanka is one of them, and nowhere else. And they're really focused. So what is it about Sri Lanka that's making businesses like yours look at this market?
First of all, thank you to the organizers for inviting me for this session. I could give you a very snappy one-word answer to your question, and that one word is growth. But let me explain it a bit. I'll put it in context. I think this is one of the few countries in the world where the consumer goods business grows at double-digit rates every year. And I think you spoke about coming shortly before the war ended. Since the war ended, and as transport has opened up, the infrastructure has opened up, things are improving, and the level of consumer confidence and consumer spending has zoomed. So if I speak about my own company, I'm not going to talk about the dairy company because I don't have too much perspective on the dairy industry. But this is one of probably I'd say about 8 to 10 countries in the world that is reporting double-digit growth this year and last year as well. You don't get those kind of numbers anywhere else in the world. If I look back on, if the typical mature market in Europe or UK or US, you grow your business by 0.5% every year and you feel very, very good about it. And that 0.5% is shelf space that you are stealing from your competitor. The market is not growing. The market is what it is because it's almost a completely saturated and penetrated market. What you're doing is really stealing shelf space and feeling good about it because that's how you get sales. This is a market which is actually growing. Of course we're in competition, and of course there's solid and respectable competition in all our categories and all our products over here. But the market itself is growing, and I think that's what makes it so completely attractive to anyone who's in the consumer goods business. And sure, we're also investing. We're investing in the business, we're investing in manufacturing, in infrastructure, in distribution, and we're very clearly here for the long term. So you've heard Unilever's been here for about 75 years, but that's the kind of perspective we have on every country that we operate in. So it is really the long term, and that's the reason I think why Sri Lanka is a very attractive destination for us.
We had a chance to interact a few weeks back, and we were talking about the talent space. We have a spectrum of sizes of companies here, and of course you're at the larger end. What is your perspective on the talent here and the talent that you're looking for in this growth that you're talking about?
Yeah, I think I was a little curious to understand your point about talent being capable because I guess it's a matter of industry. For the industry that we are in, so first of all, you slice it by vertical. So if you look at typical manufacturing supply chain talent, our expertise lies not so much in, we don't have high-end technology. At the end of the day, we are manufacturing consumer goods, but the challenge lies in, say, producing 600 bottles of shampoo in a minute or 200 tablets of soap in a minute. And it requires a very different kind of perspective on engineering and technology in terms of how you manufacture. The second is, of course, that in the kind of business that we are in, you require pretty superior people engagement and man management skills. That's equally true of brands as well. The entire marketing function in Sri Lanka is very intriguing, and I'd say even from a South Asian perspective, what it takes to sell products here or to market products here is very different from the rest of South Asia. And there's a pretty unique lever that you need to tap into. Now, on this, you overlay the fact that as an organization, we, across the world, we believe in both exporting and importing talent. So at any given point, about 5% of our workforce is outside the country, doing jobs outside in other Unilever companies, and it's almost a mandate. You need to do that in order to come back to a more senior role in the country, and it's true of every country that we're in. which makes the entire talent equation for us very critical. Now, if you look at, if you contrast that with, say, the number of, and it's just one example, the number of engineering graduates that came out of Sri Lanka in 2012 was about 2,000, give or take a few. And given the number of businesses, the number of industries we have, that number is just too small. So the only way to fill in that gap is to be looking for talent, either Sri Lankan talent from outside Sri Lanka that's coming back, or expatriate talent.
Okay,
That's the only way to sort that out.
I think we're going to move now to the audience. We have a really interesting mix of companies and professional backgrounds represented here on the panel. So let's open it up, and we'll take a bunch of questions in one round and go to the panel, and then come back to another round again. Yeah.
We have the first question here from Siddharth.
Thanks. First up, a comment and then a question. My personal take, I moved back to Sri Lanka 5 years ago. And one of the things that we lack to take into consideration coming back is the fact that when we move out of the country, we are embracing change and we are prepared for it. Coming back, we have this preconceived notion that we are moving back home. So my sincere advice for people who are on the fence is don't have the preconceived notion of coming back to familiarity. Embrace the change and then try to look in terms of what we can do about it. The question I have is, at which point do you think it might be too late to move back in order to take advantage of the first mover's advantage in Sri Lanka? First to the two gentlemen, entrepreneurship, because I feel it takes a certain personality, as Prajeeth explained to us, that you have to embrace change and to be adaptive in that sense, right? So do you figure, I mean, this question was asked before as to what the most opportune time was, but I'm rephrasing the question as to, might it be too late in, say, another decade or 2 decades' time to come back and instill the change that we need to? Thank you.
Okay, great.
It's never too late to come back. I mean, in whatever, certain people come back for the lifestyle. They want to do lifestyle business and, continue to enjoy the lifestyle along the beaches of Galle, Bentota, wherever, right? And certain people come back to get a job and move on with the job, like Virtusa and people like that who offer good jobs to people out there. I think the perception that coming back here and working also is still the old mindset thinking, oh, I worked out there and I can't work here. Because I lived outside for 20 years as well, right? So, and I've come back and worked here as well. So that's changing very fast with all these companies coming back. Then, of course, you have most people who want to come and start up companies here. And we've got that at any age. But what we have also noticed is people who want to come back are the younger generation. Because, and the older generation is just coming back more for the lifestyle than to start a business. So that's why we are basically getting more people probably below 50 coming back. So if you consider that old, then so be it. But so that's the younger generation I'm looking at, below 50, right? So I mean, and so that's why I say it's never too late. Did that answer your question, or sort of? Oh, we'll have a lot of opportunities in the next 10 years. We are still lagging about 10 years. I mean, if you take it to the, if you look at the region, as Samir said, like you got, everything is very mature there. The growth is so small. And here, you're looking at 10-20% growth because it's very, the markets are still very immature. And you can also take it to the region, right? So the scalability is there, right? So.
Just let me, yes, there is a point when it's too late, no pulse, don't bother coming back. There's huge opportunities here. I mean, I was not joking, funeral costs might be low here too, so maybe there's a chance. There's enormous, I mean, as Praj said, there's huge growth in this region. But aside from that, there's so many things screwed up here that you can come and fix. Whether it's in the government sector or even in the private sector, there are so many inefficiencies that are there. So if you have some good ideas, and it's a great place to pilot and get things going, and then prove it in this market and then take it out. Millennium IT is a superb example of an import substitute. I know people don't like to do those things. Market of one, set up a world-class stock trading system. So Absolutely. And we can only go up from here. So please come back. Oh, you're here already.
What Tilak didn't tell you probably is that it's too late if you are planning on coming for the vegetable transport business, because his robotic drones will be zipping all over the country on cargo delivery. Let's go to our next.
Can I add just
sorry,
one data point I want to share with you guys? You know, the US has been going through growth rates of, you know, under 3% for the most part, most of the time over the last few years, under 1%. But the intellectual property economy in the US has been growing faster than almost all emerging markets, bar one or two, right? So the point is, it doesn't actually matter what your headline growth rates are, what you think, you know, some of these industries have evolved to. I think, you know, particularly if you're in the intellectual property space, whatever that might be, it might be in finance, it might be in IT or whatever else. I don't think you're limited by the country, frankly, right? Virtues is a great example. You know, you can have roots in Sri Lanka, but, you know, you shouldn't really think about also having your opportunity set limited to what happens within the boundaries of this country.
I think Dumith's point is interesting because a lot of the really exciting companies we're seeing now, I mean, I see them as Sri Lankan companies, but they are truly global. Virtusa is global. MAS, just I think this month they're opening a plant in Vietnam, and they'll take huge advantage of the TPP. Hydromani's already has one there, and a lot of companies that are based in Sri Lanka, were born in Sri Lanka, set up by Sri Lankans, are now, you know, going global pretty quickly. Let's go to more questions.
I have a question here from Dilsha.
Yeah, I have two questions. I guess one is, I'm curious about your thoughts about the world of private equity in Sri Lanka. I come from that field, so to say, been in private equity for some time now. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts about that. And then secondly, I think this is for Samir, I think, most from Unilever. I worked with multinationals too back in my life. And I'm curious about how it, you know, in terms of attracting talent back here. I know there's a lot of young people here. And for, you know, I won't say all, but experienced people like me, you know, usually the multinationals prefer to promote from within. And so for someone who is older, you know, what are the opportunities or possibilities there? So those are the two questions that I have.
So maybe Samir, do you want to answer that first? And then we go to Dumith.
Yeah, thank you for that question. I think it gives me an opportunity to spell out a little bit about what we are doing. So one, you're right. By and large, we've had a history of promoting from within. So at the entry level, at the junior entry level, we have a lot of structured programs, as Chandi also spoke about in terms of the International Summer Program. And I think aside from that, because we are represented in a large number of countries, my counterparts in other countries would occasionally pick up the phone and tell me that there's a Sri Lankan candidate here. Would you like to talk? Would you like to meet? And so on. So that works. Increasingly, at middle to senior levels, we're moving to what we call, so it's the next step in diversity as far as we are concerned. So purely from a growing from within kind of paradigm, we're looking at bringing in external talent from different industries. But we recognize that that's often a very difficult process in terms of reaching out to the right candidate at the right time. So we've got most of the social media networks in place. So whether you want to like on Facebook or connect on LinkedIn with Unilever as a company or Unilever Sri Lanka as a company, that's possible. But the most preferred means is always of remaining in touch with someone in the organization who is from your functional expertise area. And that could be anywhere in Unilever, by the way. It doesn't necessarily have to be Unilever Sri Lanka because of the network that we have within HR, but that still remains a preferred route for contact. We don't use headhunters so much. Strange it may sound, but we actually rely more on social media, networks, and word of mouth referrals. And that seems to work for us to a large extent. So that's typically the route that it takes to get into Unilever at a middle to senior kind of level. But just to allay that doubt, we do recruit. It's not that we don't do it at all, but depending on the size of business, and for us, Sri Lanka is, as I said, a rapidly growing, a reasonably small to medium-sized business, so important, and it's easy to stay in touch.
Dumith, on the question of private equity.
Private equity, yeah. I think that's a good question because I think there's a general sort of, I would say, misconception that this is ripe for private equity. It is, the opportunity is ripe, but the supply side doesn't exist as well as you would, because I think we're still in that early stage of family-owned businesses migrating into professional management and seeing the value of value-added private equity. That's not just dumb capital, but smart capital. So if you're looking at growth stage or late stage mezzanine type private equity, it takes a sophisticated company owner or promoter to realize the value that it can bring to the table. Having said that, we are right in the middle of one or two situations where we've got some very interesting entrepreneurs who built companies generating over $100 million of top line, who are actively looking at 20-25% stake placements with private equity shops. But the success stories have to play themselves out so that more people will go into this. The second issue is, I think, we've seen like TPG, who bought into, Union Bank. Great deal because, from a branding perspective. But we don't have a lot of local private equity outfits. And I think, private equity is not about financial engineering. I think private equity firms created by a whole lot of ex-bankers doesn't work. It just doesn't work, right? So, when we look at it, I've personally gone through this. I am an ex-banker, but what I've pitched when we've talked about this, not the fact that I know finance, it's the fact that I've run a company, right? It's that operating experience that really matters. It's not how well you can, balance your accounts or, do some financial analysis. So that mindset hasn't changed. We have some financial institutions who created private equity firms. That's not value-added capital to most of the entrepreneurs. So the real stalemate we have to get across is for promoters to realize that there is smart capital from which you can leverage experience, international networks, in particular distribution networks, and everything else that you see in international private equity.
Dumith,
but it's coming, I think.
Can I extend on that? You talked about PE and how that's evolving. More broadly, I think we talked about this earlier also, and trying to get to where is the finance industry going from here, and in terms of the talent we're going to need. There are ambitions of making Sri Lanka a regional financial hub. We heard the budget talking about an international finance center. Now that's going to need some mad talent to make it happen. So where is this industry going, and what are the kind of talent needs that are going to emerge, and maybe potentially from Sri Lankans overseas?
Sure. I think it's a great question, particularly for those in the financial sector. I think that what we have today in terms of regulation, product availability, and financial demand is not terribly sophisticated. I think the creation of an international financial center is critical and will be the only thing that gets us very quickly to an international level across financial sophistication and products. Now, if we don't populate an international financial center with at least 50% overseas or returnee staff, the international financial center will fail, right? It will fail. So I think for all policymakers who are trying to push this, I think it's absolutely critical to tap into audiences like this. But it's not just returning Sri Lankans. You go to Dubai, you go to Singapore, all these reasonably successful international financial centers are not about locals working there. And to me, I think it's really exciting because I would love to get more of our well-educated, talented, motivated, young folks in this business learning from a lot of outside influence. And I think that's where I see this going if the International Financial Center does work out. But my one piece of advice to people who are returning from this sector is really make sure you get to know who you're going to work with, right? They need to have a lot of empathy in terms of understanding where you're coming from, what you're capable of, and what you can deliver. If you go join companies that are subscribing to the status quo, I think you'll be done within 1 year. So I think what's critically important is to make sure that you're working with individuals who have that experience, who appreciate that experience, and can continue to grow, help you grow. Because this shouldn't be what they say, an elephant's graveyard, right? Sri Lanka should not be an elephant's graveyard for anyone in any career. You should really look to still continue to build new skills and capabilities.
So as much as employers might be looking for you and vetting you, you should also really look at who you're going to work for so that you're inspired and excited to work. Yeah, let's go to one more question here, and we'll probably take these two questions together.
I'm Desha Priya. I'm a chartered accountant. I have 25 years experience in Sri Lanka in the private sector. But during this period, actually, I have seen a lot of maybe difficulties faced by the private sector in relation to this government, some policy changes and things like that, especially these tax changes and things like that, so many areas. But up to now, we can't see some sort of a clear direction on those areas. So this is to actually expect from the investor who really wants to come and invest here. So they want to know what is going to happen in next maybe few years, right? So that's all the government officials here who is representing this program. So I don't think there's anybody there are some people from central bank, but I don't know at their level they can do anything, any answer. On the other hand, this for the private sector, the availability of job opportunities, normally they publish in these top jobs. Then from that only they can see. But they are again, so those who, until you go to the interview and all, that you don't know what is the type of offer that they are giving. They will just say this is the opportunity, but no more details. They say it's attractive, higher than whatever the normal range, only just pay words. But end of the day, you see that sometimes most of those interviews, maybe the big ad, finally they are sometimes offering maybe half of your expectation. Then finally you feel like you have wasted your time at the interview. But for this type of thing, if especially from maybe Chamber of Commerce or somewhere, if they can get some sort of maybe these opportunities to their website or whatever, and give some sort of indication about the package that they're offering and the requirements, so then any person in any part of the world, they can get some idea. So that is, I think it will, because otherwise, most of my friends, they are in outside the country, so they are asking me some details about whether there's some opportunities. Then for me, I have no answer to give them. I say there are, but last 1 year I can say it's less opportunities. Even the private sector, less opportunities. The other thing is,
do you have a question, sir? Or
sorry?
Is it a question?
This is some suggestions. So one is suggestion, because otherwise...
You can keep it brief so that we can take a few more.
Yeah, okay, right, okay. Right.
So I think it's a valid point, firstly on the policy consistency. I think this is something both people working here, but as well as outside, you make a very valid point, sir, on the policy consistency is needed to give the right signals, and secondly, on hiring, the transparency so that there's more information. If I can ask you to keep the questions brief so that we can take a few more.
Right. I've got two questions. They're both similar. So, the first one is more for the entire panel. What are the challenges of selling a product to the Sri Lankan market? So that's question one. The second is a specific question to the gentleman from Unilever. You mentioned that marketing in Sri Lanka is different to the other countries in Southeast Asia. Would you like to elaborate, please? Because it's...
Yeah, let's take the other question in front here.
Yeah, we just followed. My name is Michael Munasinghe. I actually own an international headhunting company. Up till now, 6 years we've been in Sri Lanka. We've always focused on international companies outside of Sri Lanka. We're now very excited about working with Sri Lankan companies and attracting talent here. Very interested to hear the gentleman from Unilever, though, say that it's not just returning Sri Lankan talent, which we're very active in engaging with, but also foreign nationals that do see Sri Lanka as a very attractive place to work. How easy are you finding to get work visas for them? And just an extension of that, a lot of my foreigner friends that are here and overseas that would see Sri Lanka as a very attractive place to come and live and work and bring their skills, won't come because their spouse visa is a non-work visa. So if they're working in Dubai, Singapore, the UK, and they're working on 2 salaries, and they've got children that they need to put through international schools, they won't come if the spouse visa is a non-work visa, which it typically is. As a director of a BOI company, I still only get a 1-year work visa. So I'm investing thousands of dollars a year here, but I literally get 4 weeks' notice to know if I'm staying for another year. I think if there is any government influence here, they do need to expand that and increase the FDI to at least give a 5-year entrepreneur visa or something. But there needs to be some encouragement. Do you get much encouragement from the immigration or problems?
Okay. Who'd like to take the question on selling products in Sri Lanka, marketing in Sri Lanka? Who wants to go first?
So I don't know whether the question is selling products in Sri Lanka or actually designing and building products in Sri Lanka.
Selling products.
Oh, sure, you can sell them, right? Yeah, there's no problem. I mean, there's clearly opportunities if you have some value-added thing that is relevant to this marketplace. There's no issue at all. I think the same 2 degree of separation discussion that goes on applies here as well. That word of mouth is an amazingly good way of selling products in Sri Lanka because it gets around very easily. So,
Prajeeth, maybe you can come in on this because the reason you funded some of these guys is because they can potentially sell. What is it that you're seeing about
there's a demand, obviously it will automatically sell. Right? So I mean, each country has different consumer requirements. So in Sri Lanka, what we may require, India may not require. Right? So when we actually fund a product to be developed here, we may not sell the same product in another country because the requirement may change. So at the end of the day, it's how you look at the market, and as an entrepreneur, you should have a good judgment of the market itself. If you're going to go to the region, you can use this as a test market because even if it fails, you have a chance to tweak it. And then we help you take it to the region. And that's how we work with all the entrepreneurs. Yeah?
Okay. Samir? Probably the wrong person to ask because if you're a small entrepreneur trying to sell something, you'll be whacked out of the market by Unilever. Sorry.
We're not so bad. We do have small entrepreneurs supplying us and distributing our products as well. So it's not... On a limited basis, some for, well, I mean, let's not go into that space because I can talk a lot about competition, but it's not the right thing to do. No, I think that was a very good question about what I meant when I said it's a different and unique kind of market. So I'm responding at different levels. On the first instance, it probably says more about me than it does about Sri Lanka because I've only been here about 6 months now. So partially you can take it as an awareness of what I've realized. But more objectively speaking, if you compare with the rest of South Asia and the rest of Southeast Asia, most of Southeast Asia, the emphasis on the family as a unit of society and the object of selling is much bigger. So I think just after lunch, the gentleman was speaking about the family as the economic unit versus the individual. It's true in a selling paradigm as well. So to give you an example, if we, in most of the world, we sell one of our popular shampoo brands called Sunsilk on the psychological premise of enabling you to live an independent, confident lifestyle. Now that message, that shampoo message is tweaked dramatically for the Sri Lankan market because you have to put it in the context of what it does to a woman in the context of the family. It's not about leading an independent lifestyle. So that's one part, and you'll find this across all our products in terms of their positioning and the messaging. It's really putting it bang into the middle of the family. Now, what unites Sri Lanka is the family. I think what characterizes it is the amazing amount of diversity for a country and a population of this size, whether it's ethnicity, religion, language, culture, it's incredibly diverse. So on the other hand, from the selling perspective, while your question was not directly related to selling, it does mean that we need to match people to the territories they're selling in. So you do have parts of the country that speak a language, that follow a particular religion or a particular culture. There's parts of the country which are very cosmopolitan, and you do need to be able to be sure that the people you're placing in those territories actually match the consumption style of the area. Otherwise you don't make a sale. So I think that's really what I was pointing at.
I have a couple of questions to pose to Chandi as well. So maybe we'll take 2 more questions. So let's think about those questions. Oh, sorry, yes. Would you like to take that on?
So I pay the penalty for reminding you. All right. So good question, Michael. I think this whole thing about you, by the way, reminded me that my work permit also runs out in May of next year. So I should keep that in mind. Set myself a reminder for April 1 or something like that. No, I mean, in principle, I agree with you. I think it's something that the government should look at in terms of It's part of an entire package of making the employment proposition more attractive. So yes, when we speak to potential hires, it is a concern. It is something that they're concerned about in terms of how they work through that process and how they make something like that happen. And at the end of the day, there is a personal decision involved in whether you want to make that trade-off or not. So I'm not going to pretend that people willingly chuck up a dual income, dual career kind of situation and come in. That said, I found that in the overall scheme of things, when it comes to attracting investment, I think work permits and visa play a relatively minor role in the overall proposition. It's about, if you're talking about attracting FDI and investment, it works differently. But I would think of Singapore as a great example of where it works very well. So if you're, as a country which is trying to attract investment, I think they've thought through every element of the investment attraction package, which is clearly a model worth emulating in that sense, I think.
Chandi, the ICT industry, one of the most exciting in Sri Lanka, one of the only truly new sectors to have emerged, very little government support, firms going instantly global. I'd like to hear from you as someone who heads HR in one of these exciting IT companies. What is it that globally competitive firms like yours find attractive about being in Sri Lanka? And also tagged to that, what is it exciting that you're seeing in Sri Lankan ICT? Why is it such a big story, and why is it that exciting story likely to continue?
So one thing, I was at another organization before, as an MAS before, and I think irrelevant of the industry, I think Sri Lankans that we hire in this Sri Lankan market as well are equal or better than any global counterpart that you would meet. So it's an interesting place, one, because we've got some of the best brains being developed here through the education process that we have. So we have very smart graduates coming up. If you look at from a pipeline, Launchpad hires, I think Launchpad has graduates who come right after university. For this quarter that is just ending, we hired 170 undergraduates to Virtusa within 3 months. So next quarter, we look at a similar kind of 170 to 190, 200. So the quality of the graduates are very good. Apart from that, I think Sri Lanka, my personal view, is we are much more client conducive towards building relationships with clients. That client relationship, and also co-creation of innovation together with the clients. And also in general innovation, from an innovation mindset, I think Sri Lankans are much, I would like to say, up there. So I think that is the main differentiation that I see from a Virtusa perspective.
Okay. We're nearly out of time. Do we have any more questions from the audience? Yes, one more there. Please go ahead.
Hello, good afternoon. I would like to know the mechanism in place to educate the Sri Lankans abroad. Like, we are here, so we are coming to the event, and we are hearing from you. For prospectives who want to invest on, let's say, a business or an entrepreneurs or a person who looks for a job, coming back to Sri Lanka and settling down, what is the mechanism in place to educate them outside Sri Lanka?
So can I just answer partially, not the innovation perspective, entrepreneur perspective, but I think obviously, I'm just talking from Virtusa, 86% of our employee pool are millennials. And I see most of the prospective employee pool that's trying to come back are into social media. So if you're on social networks, such as, nowadays everybody's on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn. So we see that the social networks actually help us to attract, I think global, although it's global, I think it's such a small pool right now. Everybody is networked to someone. And that connectivity actually helps us to get the majority of talent who are trying to come back to Sri Lanka, connecting us through social networks. And we encourage our leadership also to be on those social platforms. One. Second is what I mentioned earlier. I think it should not also be, we should not necessarily wait until there are job opportunities. I think we should create that at the undergraduate level, that knowledge about what opportunities Sri Lanka has and position Sri Lanka. And I think that's been done with the 3 companies I mentioned earlier. When I was at MS Deutsche Bank, Dialogue, 3M summer internship program, I see John Keel's, Ceylon Tobacco, and HSBC having a similar program. I think that program, I see some of the interns on that program here as well. So I see programs like that, and not just waiting until a lateral hire to come in. Pipeline development is something I think every organization should have, and I think a lot of organizations do that.
Okay. Last question from very short answer, Prajeeth and Dumith. For you, what's the most exciting thing about Sri Lanka's startup ecosystem, the new business environment that's emerging? Just one, the most exciting thing. And Dumith, for you, you worked overseas in big organizations. You're working with your own company, managing employees, plus with other companies. What is the shift in the workplace culture that you're seeing, that one big shift that I think folks here will be excited to hear? Prajeeth, first you, and then Dumith.
So, unlike a shark, I can sleep well at night, and that's what comforts me most. Because the most exciting thing for me is seeing these entrepreneurs develop. And when I see, I get SMSs from these entrepreneurs on a weekly basis saying, "Hey, yippee, we've got so much for this week," and see them getting excited excites me, and that's why I'm so passionate about empowering entrepreneurship in Sri Lanka.
In terms of the biggest change or shift in culture, I think, coming from a big firm, those of you who are part of big firms understand there's an infrastructure that helps you at every bit of the way, whether it's, heavily staffed departments in, HR or finance, a lot of different things. Here, when you come back, and particularly when you're doing what I'm trying to do, which is start something small, there's no boundaries. One day you're, scanning through resumes. The next day you're making big strategic decisions. The next day you're meeting a client. So you really have to, be a bit of a jack of all trades. That's one. The second, I think, is that you really have to self-motivate, particularly if you are an entrepreneur. And what I'm doing is not quite a startup, but, basically, we acquired a company, we're trying to change what that company does, then next year we're going to add 3 different business lines in the financial sector. So you really have to self-motivate, because there'll be plenty of naysayers who say you can't do this or you can't do that. You need a huge amount of self-confidence and self-motivation. The final thing I would say is motivating other people. I think, certainly in some sectors or in many firms, you have 1 or 2 levers that you have, whether it's financial or promotions or something else that motivates people. I still haven't found that secret sauce, I have to admit, with a lot of local staff. So, one of the things we're trying to do to combat that is get the balance right in terms of returning, folks who will join us, because I feel like, it's a little bit easier to motivate that staff, and to balance that out, let that rub off on the rest of our staff as well.
Great. I think that's a great note to end on. And I think what you said about self-motivation is something I found out as well. To end on somewhat of a personal note, is that it's easy to, early on, maybe the first few years after the end of the war, things was somewhat slow to take off. There was a lot of excitement. It's easy to sometimes get complacent. It's easy to be told no because systems and procedures haven't moved as fast as your ideas. But the flip side of that is that when you self-motivate, there are new opportunities that open up. There are folks who will be willing to hear your idea, buy into it, and take the time to join on your journey. And that's, I think, something unique with the fact that it's a close, very generous network here in in Colombo and in Sri Lanka, that people will invest in your idea, both, whether it's just in terms of time or in terms of money. And the other thing is that for anyone who thinks that if you move back, it's just Sri Lanka, I think that's a fallacy, because this is a great place to be based, to expand your career and your positioning, your brand beyond Sri Lanka and in the region. Even in the world that I was in, the research world before, even that, South Asian networks, Asian, East Asian networks, it was fantastic. And Sri Lanka is part of those. So you're not just coming back to be in Sri Lanka, you're coming back to be part of firms that are going global, part of networks that are not just Sri Lankan, but South Asian and Asian. To end on another positive note, I think, okay, first on maybe this whole panel was sunshine and roses, but I think there are a lot of challenges, and I hope that some of the things that were mentioned here, Work in Sri Lanka will take up. And as the chamber, we're really happy to take these up to make sure more young Sri Lankans are able to come back, are motivated to come back at a policy level, at a corporate level. We'll be very happy to take those up. But I think let's just look at next year. First quarter next year, just to give you an example of the kind of dynamism. And again, it's not all sunshine, because we saw issues with the budget, but let me just give an indication of Sri Lanka going global. In January, we have a Euromoney conference. We have Joseph Stiglitz, Ricardo Hausmann, George Soros coming for a conference. In March, the Chamber is hosting a business and investor conclave. In March, Finance Asia is having a summit on Sri Lanka for investment in Sri Lanka in Singapore. And in January, the Prime Minister will be going to Davos, and there will be a special Sri Lanka side event at the World Economic Forum in Davos. So Sri Lanka truly is going global, and anyone who comes now or in the next few years will certainly be part of that going global story. So with that, thank you very much to Work in Sri Lanka. You guys are doing some great work. It was a privilege for me to join this event and moderate this panel. And thanks for our great speakers. Gave us all lots to think about, and have a good rest of the conference. Thank you.